Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. I hope you're all doing good and well. So I recently shared my top 20 albums of the year countdown, and now we're moving on to my honourable mentions. These are the albums that didn't quite make the list, which may have been for a number of different reasons. I mean, yeah, so some of these I maybe didn't quite enjoy as much as my top 20, but there are so many albums to put into, there's just only so many slots. There's only 20 slots for my top 20, right? And I couldn't get all these albums into that list, but there's still some really great stuff on this list. I still recommend these albums. Absolutely recommend these. They're getting honourable mentions because I still think they're pretty special albums. And put it this way, if I did a top 30 or a top 40 list, these albums would most likely make that list had I done that as a list instead of just a top 20. So let's crack on with these honourable mentions and not waste any further time. So we start off with my first honourable mention, which is Scar Symmetry and the Singularity Phase 2 Zenitaph, the full title. Very proggy album title. And this was a really good album, to be fair. I mean, it didn't revisit it much throughout the year, which is why it's not quite the top 20 and why it's more of an honourable mention. But Per Nilsson's guitar work for me is the absolute highlight on this album, with some wonderful melodic leads. Really great stuff from him, and I do think it's still a solid release from Scar Symmetry. It's just one that I haven't been back to a huge amount this year. So Scar Symmetry gets my first honourable mention with their album The Singularity Phase 2 Zenitaph. Next up, we switch genres completely to a dream pop album from Wild Nothing. I like my dream pop, and this was the most recent release from them, called Hold. I thought was really pretty good, actually, and a bit of a return to form for Jack Tatum. Sort of the previous albums of Wild Nothing I've not been quite as big on, but this one felt a bit of a return to form for them. I really like the songwriting on here. Loved a lot of the choruses on the album. There's just a lot of memorable things going on. I just felt that this was developing from previous albums a bit more and showing some level of maturity in the songwriting as well. I thought this was a good Wild Nothing album. Hold. My favourite track on here is probably Pulling Down the Moon, Before You, which is the final album closer. Another album closer. I swear this year has had so many great album closers, and I keep saying this, but I hope I'm not the only person that thinks that. There's been some great album closers this year. Next up, maybe they don't really need an honourable mention because they're going to be on a lot of lists and they're going to get lots of mentions. But I'm not talking about 72 Seasons. I'm talking about Foregone by In Flames. This was, for me, a genuine return to form for this band. Perhaps helped by Chris Broderick, the new guitarist, now who's joined the band. And, there's some seriously great tracks on here that may not be, still not quite in the spirit of the real old classic In Flames album, but there's a lot of great In Flames stuff on this album nevertheless. Perhaps more in the style of a sort of Come Clarity album than in one of their really early ones, but still great tracks nevertheless. In fact, State of Slow Decay, Meet Your Maker, and a lot of the early tracks on the album, Foregone Part 1 and Foregone Part 2 for me, gave the album a fantastic start. Some of the tracks later on I wasn't quite as keen on, but still a return to form by the recent sort of albums we've had from In Flames. Some of them really not very good. So this was great, and this was a return to form for me for In Flames. Next honourable mention goes to a thrash metal band called Electrocutioner with their debut album False Idols. And I came across this band and I thought that, this sounds really quite good and really promising. I'm really looking forward to whatever comes next now from Electrocutioner, having this whetting my appetite for thrash metal. Yeah, really good thrash metal here, very creative, some fantastic riffage. I've already said, I think in the review, one of my favourite tracks of the whole year is The Guillotine. And the dynamics in that track are great. It sort of goes through a couple of different changes. I love that riff at the start of the track in particular. Great song, but great album actually overall. Really good album. And I wanted to give that a special honourable mention. Mark Pacino, I think, maybe follows the channel a bit, or has been on Chill Dude on a Couch Reviews for an interview as well. So great stuff from Electrocutioner this year. Next up, I've got Horrendous with Ontological Mysterium. Actually, I'm surprised I didn't put this in my top 20, I must admit. It wasn't that I forgot about it, but there was just something after a while with that album that, unlike with Idol from 2018, which I thought was a masterpiece of a prog death metal album, that album is incredible for me. I didn't feel Ontological Mysterium quite hit the spot with me quite as much as that album, which slightly affected maybe how I judge it now. On my first listens, I was totally carried away with the hype around this album. I'll admit that, I'll confess that. And over time, it's not quite had the same appeal, but I still love it. I still think I'll probably still stick to my 9 out of 10, but it's just that the album hasn't quite had a replay value for me over time with this one from Horrendous, so it's become an honourable mention, mostly for that reason, but still a pretty awesome album from Horrendous. I think it made the Metal Meltdown's top 10 list recently. It is a great album. Burning Witches with The Dark Tower, and next up as an honourable mention. This band, they always seem to deliver a great album, actually, to be fair. And this, I put it as my least favourite on my Burning Witches ranking, but now I think it might have climbed up to number 4, at least. You know, it's not my least favourite album now. I think it's grown on me a bit. I do think it's got an album with lots of good songs. My favourites on here, the title track, The Dark Tower, but I also particularly enjoy Heart of Ice and Doomed to Die as other examples. I think the second half is particularly strong on this Burning Witches release, so The Dark Tower I thought deserved an honourable mention as well. So where are we up to now? I said these aren't in any particular order. I should have said that at the very beginning. These albums aren't really in any order. These are just my honourable mentions for the year. So we move on now to Nightmare with Deformity Adrift, this dissonant metal band. And a really interesting album, because even though it's dissonant metal, it does have a clarity about it. I think it's in the way it was mixed, maybe. The prominence of the guitars sound more prominent than on maybe an average dissonant metal style. And it's fantastic. I think it's authoritative. Again, despite being dissonance, it's an album which has a lot of authority about it and confidence behind it. And I think Nightmare Deformity Adrift is therefore one to check out if you like your dissonant metal, like it ulcerates or you know, that sort of thing. So Nightmare Deformity Adrift I give a special mention to, as well, an honourable mention. Next up, we have got Ad Infinitum and Chapter 3 Downfall. Not an album I thought I would honestly maybe even give an honourable mention to. It's sort of grown on me though over time as well, this one. It's just a very enjoyable album. You know, it's the poppy side of symphonic metal for me. Melissa Bonney, I mean, great vocalist, but I really wanted to actually shout out the guitarist in this band who plays some absolutely tremendous guitar solos. I mean, often with symphonic metal bands, you know, the female vocalist gets a lot of the attention. I mean, you would expect that. They're the star. They're the face of the bands almost, right? The guitarist in this band, I think, is Adrian the Benvit. I can't say the surname. I'm sorry. I'm not going to try. But Adrian, the guitarist, he pulls off some guitarists and solos in this album. They're actually really good. And I wanted to shout out the band, obviously, but yeah, that guitar work on that album is actually really good. I know it's slightly more on the poppy side of the sort of metal spectrum, however you want to call it. But Ad Infinitum, Chapter 3 Downfall, I've really enjoyed that throughout the year. So I thought, yeah, you know, even though it's not one of maybe my top 20, I wanted to give it a mention because it has had some replay value, that one. Next up, I'm going to shout out the band I interviewed, or at least Tom and Macy Lee, I think, from Oceans. I'm going to shout out Oceans, Dreamers in Dark Cities, another honourable mention. As a debut, now just thinking, was it a debut that I interviewed them? I should know, right? This was a debut album, I think, and it was really good. You know, interesting to talk to them about how they were working on songwriting more. And I think this album, you know, it's got a bit of a post-punk flavour, a bit of a shoegaze flavour to it. It's very spacey in the way it sounds and everything. It's really good though. Love Soft, Love Pure, love Mike Tyson. Yeah, lots of kind of nods to those sort of post-punk bands, I think, of the 1980s. But a really good album for me and very promising. I look forward to seeing what we've got from Oceans in the future. So I think that makes, I'm going to count, that makes 9 honourable mentions. I was going to do 10. We got, let me just check. 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 9 honourable mentions. Cursebinder Drifting, I think, is going to be my last honourable mention, which was a sort of black metal album, but with the dissonant elements and electronic elements all thrown in. It made for a really fascinating listen, this one. It was one of the albums I think I listened to a while back. Not giving it too many revisits. I did get it on CD, actually. I don't seem to have it on me. But yeah, that was a really good album. Very interesting one as well. But again, maybe not one I've revisited enough to have thought, oh, that needs to go in my top 20. So it didn't quite make the top 20, but still another really interesting album from 2023 that I thought, yep, I'll give that an honourable mention as well. So that's my list of honourable mentions. Thank you so much, guys, for watching the video again. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to drop a like and a sub if you enjoyed this kind of content. Otherwise, from me, until next time, take care, everybody, until my next video, which will be the Christmas sign-off video, the longer video. I've got some shorts maybe, but otherwise until then, bye for now.